As a child, I firmly believed that all icons and images of saints in general were only beneficial, and if not beneficial, they couldn't do any harm. Then one day I realised that any object, even an icon, could carry negative energy. My mother, a knowledgeable person, always attracted people to her. One day a woman whose name I don't remember came to her. She told her about a friend of hers who had a small icon, like this one, the kind people often take with them on trips. And this friend couldn't get enough of this icon. It brought nothing but joy and benefit. In short, she called it miraculous and sincerely believed in it. How could you not believe it? This icon had been given to the woman as a gift from a distant relative who had never wanted for anything until old age. So this woman experienced the icon's power. She looked younger, she and her husband were promoted at work, life improved, and a long-awaited child was born. In short, everything was great. My mother listened to all this and asked what the reason for the visit was. Then, the woman with the icon's friend hesitated a little, as if trying to find the right words. "This icon's bad," she declared firmly. "I walk past it or look at it and I immediately feel sick. No matter how many times I go to my friend's house, as soon as I step outside and come home, I immediately feel sick. I could even be bedridden for a month." "And you're not the only one who thinks so?" my mother asked. "You've guessed it. There used to be a whole bunch of us, but now, since this icon has appeared, no one wants to go to the house. We've had falling outs, or we just don't talk anymore for various reasons. It depends on each person. This icon makes everyone feel bad, but its owner gets better every day, visibly rejuvenating." Mother told her that she needed to see the icon up close, no matter what. The visitor simply shrugged and admitted that she tried to beg her friend for the icon, but her friend had gone crazy for a moment, become furious and chased her away. A month passed, maybe two. My mother learned that the owner of that icon had fallen seriously ill. She had been bedridden for several months, and then her husband had also fallen ill. It was then that the family gave the icon to their relatives. They all immediately recovered, and the child, who had also been seriously ill, also began to recover. In the new family, the icon once again became a revered relic. But the icon didn't stay in the new home for long. It brought the family much joy and happiness, especially material, but all of this was overshadowed by a terrible tragedy: the death of the family's father. He burned to death in a car. A year after all these events, the icon somehow managed to end up in the hands of the very woman who had come to my mother for advice. She immediately came back and handed it over without hesitation. It depicted Christ himself. My mother examined it for a long time, then hid it in a small chest. She most likely did something else with it, but I wasn't there to witness it. So, we've kept the icon ever since. My mother used to look after it, but now I do. My mother didn't give me any specific instructions except one: try not to look in the Saviour's eyes and don't think anything about it. As I understand it, this icon feeds on people's emotions, and when it changes hands, it gives its power to the new owner, then it all goes back to the drawing board. I don't remember where this icon is now. I try not to touch it at all. A couple of times my gaze lingered on it, old, shabby, but somehow unpleasant. The gaze of the person depicted on it is prickly and unpleasant. He certainly shouldn't be like that. I've always been curious to know who made this icon, what emotions went through their minds when they created it, if it subsequently brought so much suffering to people. My phone rang. That's basically how it all started. My husband and I are avid internet users, so as soon as we moved into our new apartment, we immediately connected a landline and the internet. The phone rang after midnight. We weren't sleeping though, we were watching a movie, so we answered quickly. My husband picked up, stood silently for a couple of minutes, his face drawn, and then beckoned me over to listen. A crackling, hissing sound came from the receiver, and somewhere far away, a man's voice was monotonously chanting. The background noise made it difficult to understand. The only thing I caught was something about Maxim, about how nice it is there, and about some Katya. Our invisible caller emphasized the woman's name with his intonation, repeating demandingly several times, "Katya. Katya, I need Katya. Give Katya." "That's strange. Must have got their own number," my husband said as he hung up. I probably wouldn't have even remembered this incident if a couple of days later the call hadn't been repeated. This time I picked the phone up and heard her clear, "It's cold in here." Then more mumbling, and it was the same male voice. And again, "Katya, I'd like Katya." Anyway, I didn't listen any further. A day later, another call. We decided to celebrate a housewarming and invited all our friends and acquaintances. Ilya, my husband's colleague, answered the phone. A little tipsy, he decided to play a joke on the call and started asking him stupid questions. It was all funny and amusing until Ilya blurted out, "Are you calling from the other side?" And upon hearing the answer, he turned pale. "From where you will all be, Ilya," said the caller. "Idiot," our friend cursed. "And how does he know my name?" The whole group laughed at the frightened Ilyusha. We were sure someone was playing a joke on us. An hour later, as everyone was about to leave, the phone rang again. My cousin, Galia, picked it up. She was standing closest to the receiver. "There's no Katya here, don't call here again," she declared. Silence fell over the hallway. My cousin stood there with the receiver, her voice fading, and on the floor lay the phone cord. Someone had accidentally pulled it out, probably tripping over it in the darkness. The voice gradually faded and then silence fell. Our guests were instantly blown away. Luckily the call stopped after that. Perhaps the caller had given up hope on finding his Katya or... it's just too scary to even think about the other thing. My husband and I, whenever we think about what happened, always ask ourselves, who was it that was calling us, and most importantly, from where? This strange incident happened in the mid-1990s. I was a student at a regular public school somewhere between 6th and 7th grade. The school I attended was located next to my building and was visible from my apartment windows. Consequently, my commute from the front doors of school took about 5 minutes. This never stopped me from regularly being late for my first class. I was in the first shift at the time when the last class ended, as I recall, at 12:40. That day was no different from any other day in the life of an ordinary Russian school child from the 1990s. Classes were over and my classmate and friend and I headed home. It's worth noting that we didn't take the usual route home from school but decided to walk to the kiosks at the bus stop and buy some gum. Those who grew up in the 90s know about the rampant collecting of gum inserts among teenagers of the 90s generation. Along the way we chatted languidly about dendy games and shared impressions of movies we'd recently watched on VHS. After buying some gum and discussing which inserts we'd gotten, we headed home. My friend and I lived in the same courtyard but in different houses facing each other. Our courtyard was large, so we went our separate ways and partied at an intersection. All these details are needed to explain, or rather to illustrate the inexplicability of subsequent events. So, the long backstory is over, now the story itself. After crossing the courtyard, I confidently and casually entered my building, and the first thing I noticed was the light bulb on the first floor landing was extra dim. After all, when I left that morning, the bulb had been bright and I remembered that perfectly. Perhaps it had burned out while I was in school and been replaced, I thought, and called the elevator. Stepping into the elevator, I pressed the button for my floor and immediately felt a difference in speed. The elevator was going up faster than usual. Such subtleties are only noticeable when you've been using the same elevator for a very long time and become so accustomed to it that you can almost accurately predict how long it will take to reach your floor. At that moment I began to wonder if I'd arrived somewhere wrong, but I quickly dismissed that and got off at my floor, and immediately had this strange feeling as if everything here was familiar yet somehow different. It's a similar feeling as when you return home after a long absence. I looked around just in case. The stairwell seemed the same as always, but something was off. Realising this, I walked less confidently towards my apartment door. Near the door I took out my key and for some reason listened. Behind the door I heard a radio, specifically the time signal from Mayak radio. It should have been around 1 o'clock by my reckoning. It might seem like nothing out of the ordinary, but no one ever listened to Radio Mayak in my house. In fact, no one ever listened to the radio at my house at all except for the odd occasion, and even then it wasn't Mayak. No one should have been in my house at 1 o'clock. I tentatively and slowly inserted the key into the door and it slid easily and softly into the lock. I was about to turn the key when I heard a voice behind the door, perhaps a child or a woman's. I froze. The laughter stopped, replaced by a calm, relaxed male voice. I was surprised to realise that people were talking and laughing behind the door of my apartment, and I counted at least 3 different voices. No matter how hard I listened, I just couldn't make out the words. I knew for sure that someone was in my apartment, and judging by the sounds, they were sitting in the kitchen drinking tea, chatting and listening to Radio Mayak. But who was it? My parents? They never came home at this time. Thieves? Would thieves really have broken into the house, brought a radio from somewhere, turned on the radio, and sat down to drink tea in the kitchen, chatting pleasantly? That's when my first explanation for what was happening occurred to me. I must have been lost in my thoughts and accidentally walked into either the wrong entrance or the wrong building. This isn't surprising for a neighbourhood filled with typical new buildings, though nothing like this had ever happened to me before. It was because my friend and I had changed our routine for getting home, which had become automatic. The fact that the key worked doesn't mean anything at all. In the wild 90s, we managed to open locks practically with wire. I slapped myself on the head, realising what a weirdo I was because I almost walked into someone else's apartment, which, incidentally, the owners were in at the time. Trying to make as little noise as possible with the lock, I removed the key and quietly moved towards the elevator, called it again, and it immediately opened at my floor. However, I was back to feeling completely bewildered after I stepped out of the building's entrance, because it was mine, and the street in front of me was a familiar one. In a state of daze from not understanding what was happening, I wandered off down the street, and probably on autopilot, I found my way to school. I went inside and hung around the first floor for about 15 minutes. There was no one on the first floor except for the cleaning lady who was keeping an eye on the locker rooms because it was afternoon classes. Unable to think of anything else to do, I decided to wash up in the school restroom and walk home again. Reaching the entrance, I cautiously stepped inside, and the first thing I saw was a brightly glowing light bulb. Then I got into a regular elevator and rode up to my usual floor. There was no longer any feeling that anything was amiss. Before opening the door, I listened for a long time, and hearing nothing suspicious, I cautiously entered the house. I left the door open so that I could retreat immediately if any danger arose. I carefully peered into the kitchen. No one was there, and there was no radio either. I then methodically and carefully examined all the rooms, even the toilet, bathroom, balconies and storage rooms. I looked under the beds, sofas and in the closets. There was nothing unusual or strange there. I locked the front door and only then looked at the clock. The time was 3:30. I locked the front door and only then looked at the clock. The time was 3:30, although by my calculations it should have been no later than 1:30. I turned on the TV and waited for my parents. They arrived as usual in the evening. Casually I asked them if they'd come home at dinner time. They answered unequivocally and categorically that they had not. So where did I end up when I first came home from school? Did I accidentally lost in thought wander into the next building? And why did I arrive home 2 hours later than I should have? Was I in a daze and didn't notice the passage of time? What worries me the most, though, is the question, what would have happened if I'd opened the door? I want to tell you about something that's stuck in my childhood memory. A new family came to live in our village, an old woman and her granddaughter. After some time, people started talking about the old woman being a witch, but my story is not about her, but about the granddaughter. The new girl was seated at the same desk as me. I never wanted to sit next to a girl, but you couldn't argue with our homeroom teacher. Everyone in our school was afraid of her. Huge, almost 2 meters tall, wearing size 10 shoes, she towered over us like a watchtower. She saw and heard everything we did or tried to do. The new girl's name was Nadia, and she came to us from a village with a strange name, Nakalovka. The name of her former village didn't suit this girl's appearance at all. She sat quietly and listened attentively, and when she solved problems, she bowed her head to her shoulder and bit her tongue in concentration. There was nothing to quarrel about with her, and surprisingly we became friends. One day when we were walking to school, we were on the same route, I admitted that I was completely unprepared for the lesson, and Lanky, that was our class teacher's nickname, promised to call me to the board. Nadia listened to me and said, "She won't, don't worry." I didn't argue because I knew that if Lanky said she would, you could be sure it'd happen. Lanky never throws words to the wind. I sat through the entire lesson holding my breath, but she never called me to the board. Don't think I was lazy though, I enjoyed studying, but my father had a tendency to go on drinking binges from time to time, and on those days there was screaming and tears in the house, making studying simply impossible. I don't know why, but I told Nadia about this. To my amazement, she took off her cross, handed it to me and said, "Drop my cross in a glass of vodka when father's back is turned, and he'll never drink again." I picked up the cross with mixed feelings. I both believed and didn't believe what Nadia had told me. At home, Dad continued to drone on. That's what my mother had said about his drinking. I managed to dip the cross in my father's wine. About a minute later, I saw him literally vomiting the wine he'd drunk. He's drunk enough, my mother screamed as my father vomited. From that day on, whenever he started drinking, he vomited. Then, he quit drinking completely to the great joy of our entire family. I've seen Nadji do incredible things more than once. Dogs, even the most vicious ones, will tuck their tails between their legs and run away. And once, for New Year's, Nadji was asked to be the snow maiden, but at the very last minute the vice principal's daughter was chosen instead. I saw tears on Nadji's cheeks. It seemed her efforts to sew the snow maiden costume had been in vain. Nadia ran out of the assembly hall, and then, for no apparent reason, the decorated Christmas tree burst into flames and caught fire. The tree was put out, but the party was cancelled. I heard all the adults saying that there was a short circuit, but I knew it happened because Nadia had been offended. And you should never offend a witch. It was 2001. Everyone was thriving at the end of the 90s. There was a boy living in our neighbourhood named Anton. He was cheerful, smart and good looking. Girls liked him, guys respected him. He had only one downside. He loved the high life. He wanted everything he could dream of: his own apartment, a decent car and good girls. He wanted it right away, at 18. But he didn't have the money for such a high life, and he didn't really want to earn money, and he couldn't make that kind of money anywhere else. Almost. So he got involved with some guys. Not ordinary guys. He did all the dirty work for them, except for killing, which was good. He ran errands and they gave him money for it. Not much, but enough for a car and a rented apartment and a nice girl. Then disaster struck, with his father. An urgent operation, needing money. He borrowed a large sum from his so-called friends, using the car and his parents' apartment as collateral. The operation was unsuccessful due to a medical error and his father was left disabled. But the loan still had to be repaid. Anton didn't have that kind of money. Appraisers valued the car at half its original value. 3 other people were registered in the apartment, so there was nothing to take from Anton. 2 days after the assessment, Anton disappeared. His mother filed a police report on the second day after his disappearance. Investigators were initially reluctant to accept it, but after her explanation they quickly took up the case. The previous evening, her phone rang. His mother picked it up and heard Anton's voice. "Mama, please help me." Then there was a scream and the phone slammed down. They searched for him for 5 days. Everyone, the police, his friends from the neighbourhood and even his comrades. They found him in a small forest not far from residential buildings. It was terrifying to imagine that this mutilated body had once been our Anton. They stabbed him to death, brutally. It seemed like a simple matter. Everyone knew Tokuskillos by sight. 2 had already been detained, however, they were immediately released. The mother withdrew her complaint and the question was answered. Right on the day of the funeral they called her and said, "If you don't take back the application, they'll dig another grave nearby for his little brother." What else could the terrified mother do? Some time passed. There was a boy hanging around with us at the time. His dad worked as an investigator at the local police station. His father said, "I'm sitting at work rummaging through paperwork. The door opens. One of those guys, the gangsters involved in Anton's case, is standing there. He's holding a bottle of vodka, standing there looking at me, shaking all over like he's hungover. I say to him, 'What are you doing here, Vovo? They let you go.' And he's even brought vodka in with him. Did you decide to pay him off with a few bribes, or did you have no one to drink with?' And he says to me, 'No, I came to write a confession. I'll tell you everything now and you decide for yourself where to send me, to the loony bin or to prison. I can't take this anymore. That's it, I'll write everything. I'll just have a little drink for courage. Do you have a glass?' I gave him a glass. He poured himself a full glass and drank it in one gulp. We didn't want to kill him, just to scare him a little bit, to get him to pay back the debt faster. We poked him with a knife just to scare him and left, leaving him behind. We thought he'd recover and make it home, but he bled out. A week has passed since the funeral. We've already forgot about him. I decided to go to bed early, but I woke up abruptly to the phone ringing. The caller ID wasn't showing. I picked it up and held it to my ear. I heard a strange crackling noise and a cry. "Mama, please help me." The sound cut out and only short beeps came through. I knew it was someone's stupid joke, but I could have sworn it was Anton's voice. I recovered a bit in the morning. I was beginning to suspect it was just my own alcohol-fueled fantasy. By evening I'd forgotten all about it. The next night though, same thing. In the morning I go to get the call log. I grab it in a rage thinking, well, I'll come to you now, you joker. You remember more than just your mother. I looked and there was no incoming calls registered. I approached the operator and asked her to check. Same thing. That's when I started to get scared. I asked my friend Borka to stay with me for the night. We're sitting, we've had a drink, it's 2 a.m. Suddenly I hear a frantic squeal in my yard. My dog's barking. I grab the gun and run outside. I look into the pen, and there's my Staffy, a healthy, seasoned dog, huddled in the corner and squealing, his fur standing on end. I look in the direction the dog is looking, and there's a man standing by the fence. It's dark and I can't make out who's there. I ask, the man's silent, and I start to get angry. I run to the fence, stop 2 meters away and start yelling. It was Anton. My first thought is, he's alive, the bitch. Well, I'll fix that now. I take out my gun and start shooting. 6 bullets went through. I was shooting point blank and he stands there and don't give a damn. That's when I sobered up. I, a grown man who doesn't believe in God or the devil, excuse me, but I was so overwhelmed I immediately remembered some prayer. I'm standing there trying to pronounce it, my tongue won't obey me, and then I hear Borka scream behind me. I turn sharply and run to him. He asks why I shot. I start to explain. Borka looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm yelling, don't believe me, go and look. I turn around and there's no one there. Borka led me into the house, laid me down on the couch. He sat there with me until the morning with the light on. I went to church that morning. I'm walking around there lighting candles for everyone, not knowing who needs what. Suddenly I feel a gentle nudge on my back. I turn round and there's a woman standing there. She's staring at me silent, so uneasy. I can't even tear my eyes away from her, let alone say anything. Then she says, you placed all the candles correctly, son, but not for everyone. There, you see, there's a big table, that's where you should put them for the repose of the soul. And repent, son. Repent, you'll see, it'll become easier. And she left me. I digested what she'd said for a minute. I wanted to catch up with her, but I turned around and she was gone. Suddenly, it was like an epiphany came over me. I lit a candle, went to the cemetery and asked Anton for forgiveness. Then I bought a bottle of vodka and came to you. Do you think they'll be treating me for a long time after this?
Brother didn't need any treatment. He didn't live to see the trial. They say he died of a heart attack in the pre-trial detention centre, but who knows after that. This story's not mine. Someone else told it to me. I write it in her words. All my life I've loved listening to interesting, mysterious and sometimes scary stories. As a child it was a mild hobby, but in my youth it developed into a true hobby, comparable to coin collecting. I was the one collecting the stories I'd heard from people. Here's one such story. It was told to me by a now grown woman named Marina. She approached me through an ad. I arranged to meet her at a cafe, intending to listen to her and of course treat her to a drink for the information she'd provided. We immediately ordered everything we wanted and she began telling her story. As a child I would spend the summer in a small village with my grandparents. Wooden houses here were comfortably located next to low-rise apartment buildings which attracted people with their reasonable prices. My family lived well, not rich but not poor either. My grandmother often sent me into the forest to pick berries and I was happy to go for a walk, especially when I was older. So one day, when I was already 15 and visiting my grandparents again, my grandmother decided to send me into the forest to pick berries. As usual, she warned me not to stray too far and to pick berries along the paths. My grandfather once again simply tried to dissuade me from going anywhere at all, and at the same time he was angry with my grandmother, asking, "Where are you sending the girl?" Well, I decided it was just a disturbance and went off to pick berries with a calm conscience. I walked through this forest, following all the rules. I didn't stray too far, only followed the path. But there were only a few berries along the path, and as you walked further into the forest, the berries on the bushes were so heavy they almost touched the ground. I saw all this wealth and couldn't resist. I left the path and wandered far away, the treetops barely let in the sunlight. A few minutes later I had already filled a large bucket and was happily getting ready to go back, when I saw a child sitting under one of the bushes, a boy of about 6 years old. At first I was a little startled by the surprise, but when I pulled myself together I approached. He was wearing old clothes, his shirt with short pants and a woolen vest with threads already sticking out.
"What are you doing here alone?"
I asked the boy.
"Are you lost?"
The child stared straight through me as if I were invisible. I spent several minutes trying to find out who he was and what house he lived in. Finally, he looked straight at me.
Yeah, I'm lost.
The boy nodded and grabbed my hand. I even gasped he was holding me so tightly, but I didn't pay much attention to it, thinking the child was scared and needed to be taken home immediately. And besides, the sun was starting to set. He and I, holding hands, emerged from the forest and headed towards the houses. In reality, the boy was leading me. I was just following behind him, looking around.
Who do you live with?
I asked the boy.
With Mum and Dad.
He answered.
I'm sick, they're probably worried. They'll beat me. No one's gonna beat you.
I assured him.
And who did you go into the forest with? With Dad. We were walking together and then he ran away.
It all seemed strange to me. How could a grown man be so afraid of that he'd managed to leave his child in the forest? Determined to figure it out, I was already walking through the village when suddenly the boy let go of my hand.
Your house?
I pointed to an old but neat wooden house. I was a little surprised. I knew who lived there, a very old husband and his wife. Then I thought that perhaps young relatives with a child had come to visit them.
Yes, mine.
The boy smiled.
By the way, my name is Vasilko.
Vasia ran towards the house. I watched him open the gate and disappear into the courtyard. With a calm heart, I went home with my bucket full of berries. At home, I told my grandparents everything and started asking them questions. They kept looking at me strangely as if I were telling them a tall tale. I couldn't stand the strange looks any longer and asked them, point blank, what was going on.
That old couple don't have any relatives.
My grandmother shook her head sympathetically.
They buried their only child a long time ago. They never had any more children. Typhus killed many people back then, including him. Of course, they buried the sick poorly back then. They burned them and buried the ashes.
I was a little scared then. Later I thought that maybe this boy had gone to the wrong house and I hoped that his parents would eventually find him. The next morning we learned that the grandfather from the house I'd brought Vasilek to had died. Naturally we went to the grief-stricken widow. Words cannot describe how that grandmother cried. To distract her I asked without a second thought.
Where's Vasilek?
The babushka stopped crying and seemed to go limp. My grandfather barely caught her and another elderly woman came running with heart drops for her.
My Vasilek has been in the other world for a long time already,
she whispered before losing consciousness. Now I was horrified. Who'd I brought into their house? It turned out I brought a dead child, although that simply couldn't be true. Back home, my grandfather decided to talk to me.
Vasilyok took Grandpa Mitya.
He told me very seriously.
But I don't know if he came for him on time or early. Be careful, Marinka.
From that very day on, the locals began to treat me very badly. Some of the old-timers seriously claimed that I was to blame for Grandpa Mitch's death, to which my own grandfather replied that the sand had already fallen off Grandpa Mitch's neck. It so happened that from that summer on I never returned to that village again and my grandparents moved to our city. I still wonder what happened then and whether I'm to blame for it.
And to end, here's a little one.
There was an old woman living in the building. Whenever we met, she liked to tell us in detail how her day had gone. Later, she started pinning notes to the front door with what she was going to do. For example, went to the market. One day I was coming downstairs and saw a note saying, in the hospital. And a couple of days later, I saw a note saying, died. I called an ambulance and the police, and when they arrived, the door was unlocked. The body was in the hallway.